You're 13 years old in the Casbah of Algiers when the soldiers kick in your neighbor's door before dawn. Not because he fired a gun. Not because anyone saw him plant a bomb. Because somebody whispered a name. And in a city like this, a whisper can get a whole staircase killed. Boots thunder up the steps. Your mother blows out the lamp. Your little sister wakes up crying. Through the cracks in the shutters, you watch French paratroopers drag your neighbor into the alley in his undershirt, barefoot, blinking like a man pulled out of a dream and shoved straight into judgment. His wife runs after him. A soldier hits her so hard she falls against the wall and stays there. They don't explain anything. They don't have to. That's your first lesson in Algiers. When an empire gets scared in a city, every door becomes temporary. You already know the city is split. There's a European city below. Wide boulevards. Cafes. Police. Neon. Men in suits pretending Algeria is France and will stay that way forever. Then there's the Casbah. Tight stairs. Crowded rooms. Watchful windows. Messages carried in bread baskets and cigarette packs. Too many people in too little space. All learning how to hear danger before it reaches a landing. By the time you are old enough to understand politics is already in the walls. France has ruled Algeria since the 19th century. The war began in 1954. By the time the Battle of Algiers explodes in 1956 to 1957, the city is no longer a city. It is a net, and every knot is pulled tight. And that's how it begins. Your life as an Algerian underground courier. At first, you are useful because you are ordinary. A boy with bread. A boy with cigarettes. A boy sent to fetch soap, tea, kerosene, news. Nobody looks twice at a child carrying errands through the alleys. That is why the first message reaches you in something as stupid as a folded scrap tucked under flatbread. Take this to the woman in the blue door. No names. No questions. No mistakes. You knock. She takes the bread, feels the paper hidden inside, and for 1 second her face changes. Not relief. Recognition. That's how the underground recruits people in cities. Not with speeches. With one task that proves you can keep your mouth shut. Soon there are more errands. A packet of money. A note wrapped in cloth. A warning passed stair to stair before a raid arrives. An address memorized and burned from your mind the second you reach it. The FLN's urban network in Algiers depended on exactly this kind of invisible labor during the Battle of Algiers. Couriers, safe houses, lookouts, and small cells that made the city itself part of the war. You tell yourself you are not a fighter. That helps at first. Then one evening your mother asks where you've been, and you lie to her so smoothly it scares you. That's when you understand. Underground work doesn't begin when you carry the message. It begins when deception starts feeling necessary. At 14, the checkpoints multiply. French soldiers at the square. French soldiers at the lower market. French soldiers outside the bakery. Searches. ID checks. Curfews. Questions. More questions. The city starts feeling less like a home than a throat with a hand around it. In 1957, French authorities gave General Jacques Massu and the paratroopers sweeping powers in Algiers. They dismantled much of the FLN network in the city, but they did it through mass arrests, torture, disappearances, and killings outside legal process. The adults don't say torture in front of children yet. They say things like, "He didn't come back," or "They took him for questioning." In Algiers, those mean the same thing. One afternoon, you deliver a message to a tailor shop that doesn't look like a tailor shop anymore. The sign is still there. The scissors are still hanging. But the room smells wrong. Too sharp. Too chemical. Too frightened. A man in the back has no shoes on. His face is purple on one side. He tries to drink water and can't hold the cup straight. Nobody explains what happened to him. Nobody needs to. That's another lesson the city teaches fast. Torture enters a neighborhood before the victim gets home. It changes how people sit, how they lower their voices, how they look at drains, cellars, empty rooms. Even before you know the methods, You know the atmosphere. Terror leaves a smell. At 15, you get your first real choice. Until now, you have carried notes. Now they want you to carry a package. Small, wrapped in cloth, heavier than bread. You don't ask what's in it. The woman with the blue door doesn't volunteer. She only says, if they stop you, drop it and keep walking. You take it through 2 alleys, down a stair, across a square, then hand it to a man in a clean jacket who looks like a clerk. 3 hours later, an explosion rolls through the lower city. Glass, screaming, sirens, panic, climbing the walls. You never learn exactly who died. That's the moment your life changes shape. Before, you were helping. Now you are implicated. That is how urban war works. Nobody stays innocent long enough to notice when the line vanished. The Battle of Algiers was not one long front line. It was a struggle for control over the Muslim population of the capital, marked by FLN bombings and French counterinsurgency built on raids, roundups, torture, and disappearances. From inside it, the city feels even simpler. You are either carrying something, hiding someone being watched, or already too late. A bomb in a cafe, a raid in the Casbah, a body in an alley, a mother pretending she does not know where her son sleeps now, an old man suddenly very interested in who comes and goes from your staircase. Everybody is part of the battle. The only question is whether they know it yet. At 16, your older cousin Kareem is taken. He is not important enough to be famous. That's exactly why he disappears so easily. 2 jeeps for soldiers. One over his head before the neighbors can even gather. Your aunt screams his name down the stairwell until her voice breaks. For 3 days she goes office to office asking where he is. Nobody knows. Or everybody knows and no one wants to say. Then, 6 days later, Kareem comes back. Alive. That's the worst part. His fingernails are broken. One eye barely opens. He flinches when someone shuts a cupboard too hard. He sits in the corner and stares at the wall like the wall is still asking questions. You bring him tea. He doesn't drink it. On the 4th day home, he hangs himself from a ceiling beam with a length of cloth. That's when you stop believing survival is the same thing as being spared. At 17, your mother finds a coded note in the hem of your shirt. For a second, neither of you speaks. Then she slaps you, not because she hates what you are doing, because she understands it too well. Your father died years earlier at a worksite outside the city. She has already buried 1 man. She does not intend to lose a son to a basement, a checkpoint, or a courtyard execution with no witnesses. You think they won't torture you because you're still a boy, she hisses. You have no answer, because by then the answer is obvious. No, they won't. The French offensive tightens. Safe houses fall. Couriers vanish. 1 man in your network is suddenly arrested with addresses he should never have had written down. Another tries to move locations and walks straight into a trap. The Casbah, once a maze, starts feeling mapped. That is what torture does in a city war. It turns pain into information, and information, in enough quantity, becomes architecture. By mid-1957, the French had largely broken the FLN's urban network in Algiers through exactly those methods, even though the larger war continued. You are still alive by then mostly because you are young, forgettable, and cautious. None of those are permanent conditions. The arrest comes at dusk. You are carrying nothing. That is the worst kind. If they catch you with a package, at least the fear has shape. But this time it's just 2 men at the corner. Plain clothes, too calm, one stepping left when you step right. A hand on your shoulder. A car door opening. No warrant. No explanation. No witnesses who will admit they saw. The room they take you to is small, bright, and ugly in a bureaucratic way only empires can manage. A table, a chair, water, questions, names, addresses, who passed what, who reports to whom. You say nothing. They hit you. You say nothing. Then the real interrogation begins. Years later, Men in uniforms and politicians in Paris will call this necessity counterterrorism, pacification, intelligence work. But the historical record is clear enough. Torture was systematic in the Algerian War, especially in the Battle of Algiers, and French officials later acknowledged a system that enabled arrests, detention, torture, and disappearances. Inside the room, the language is less elegant. Water, wires, sleep taken from you in strips, questions asked until they stop sounding like questions and start sounding like the shape of the room itself. You do not last as long as you imagined. That is another lie boys tell themselves before men hurt them properly. Pain does not make you noble. It makes time slippery. It makes memory bargain. It makes silence feel heavier than betrayal. You give them one address, not the biggest one, not the one with the most people, just one. That is all it takes. By dawn, a safe apartment is raided. A printer is seized. 2 men are arrested. 1 woman jumps across a rooftop and breaks her leg. Another disappears into custody and is never seen again. You learn about it later from whispers in the holding room. No one blames you out loud. That would almost be kinder. They just stop meeting your eyes. This is the city's deepest cruelty. It does not only punish betrayal, it punishes collapse. Then, just as suddenly as it began, you are released. No apology, no charge, no explanation. Just your body returned to the street, like damaged property no longer worth storage. You walk home to the Casbah in daylight, and every doorway feels like judgment. Your mother opens the door, sees your face, and begins to cry before she touches you. You expect relief. What comes instead is emptiness, because the boy who used to move through these alleys carrying notes and feeling useful is gone. The French didn't need to kill you. They only needed to change what sort of person could still climb these stairs. The war goes on, not just in Algiers, in the mountains, in villages, in prisons, in camps, in whispers carried across borders. The Battle of Algiers ends as a tactical French victory, but not a political one. Algeria will still become independent in 1962 after a war that leaves deep scars on both societies. People outside will later compress all of this into a sentence. Algeria won independence. True, and still not enough, because independence is not the same thing as getting the disappeared back, or unlearning what interrogation did to your cousin's eyes, or discovering which words you gave away in pain, and which ones your mind invented later to survive itself. In 1962, the city erupts, flags, shouting, gunfire fired upward in celebration, instead of into bodies for once. People kissing in stairwells, women weeping, men laughing too hard. You stand in the crowd and feel nothing for a full minute. Then you feel ashamed for feeling nothing. That is a final trick of survival in a dirty war. When victory comes, it arrives to a nervous system trained for raids. Freedom walks in. Your body still hears boots. You survive the Casbah. But survive is too gentle a word. You survive curfews. You survive checkpoints. You survive carrying messages through a city learning to eat its own fear. You survive bombs, raids, disappearances, interrogation rooms, and the unbearable mathematics of saying one wrong thing under pain and living long enough to hear the consequences. You survive all of it. But the boy who once thought cities were built from houses and markets and neighbors, he doesn't. Empire takes him, or finishes the job. And the new nation has to be built with what remains. You've seen Colonial Algiers, where an empire tried to keep a city by turning whole neighborhoods into files, suspects, and confessions. But farther east and a century earlier, another world offered a different trap. No checkpoint, no safe house, no torture cellar. A barracks, a market, a boy bought into power, and a throne guarded by slaves who could become kings.